Tables and seats are now on sale for the biggest night in the digital video calendar, the TellyCast Digital Video Awards. We're celebrating excellence in the only award ceremony created especially for the social video industry, with over 100 channels, shows and series shortlisted across 27 categories. It all takes place on the evening of 5th of June during South by Southwest London Week at the luxurious Londoner Hotel in Leicester Square. The guest list reads like the who's who in the next generation of entertainment. So book your table, half table or seat now and join the talent and executives shaping the content industry of tomorrow. Just visit digitalvideoawards.co.uk to secure your place now. The TellyCast Digital Video Awards, the biggest night in the digital video calendar. We'll see you there. Welcome to TellyCast, the podcast that dives deep into the people and stories shaping the content industry. I'm Justin Crosby, and today we're celebrating 25 years of one of the most iconic and anarchic comedy shows of all time, Trigger Happy TV. For videos featuring the movers and shakers of the content industry, just search TellyCast TV on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. So back in 1999, Dom Joly burst onto our screens with giant mobile phones, surreal sketches, and some of the most brilliantly bizarre public pranks ever seen. The show became a cultural phenomenon, influencing comedy for decades and giving us some truly unforgettable TV moments. Now, a quarter of a century later, Dom is taking Trigger Happy TV on the road for the first time ever with a brand new live tour. But how does a show built on hidden camera chaos translate to the stage? And in a world of smartphones, social media and viral video, does prank comedy still have the same bite? And in this episode, we'll look back at the madness making Trigger Happy TV and what fans can expect from that live tour. Plus, we'll ask if Trigger Happy TV were made today, how would it look? So get ready to relive the chaos. Dom Joly, welcome to TellyCast.
Thank you very much. I think it was 2000 it first came on.
Was it 2000?
Well, I know it was because it was 14th of January 2000. And
right.
Victor Lewis Smith gave, honestly, the most glowing review ever written about it in the Evening Standard. And he said that we'd turned the humble practical joke into an art form. And he said, without doubt, the best comedy show of the millennium, which was great. But we were only 14 days into the millennium, so it was good, but I took it. But yeah. Now, we made a little pilot in 1999, but I think really it happened. It was 14th of January 2000, which is why we're doing the 25th anniversary now.
Of course. Yeah, I need to get my maths in order. So how does it feel then to look back 25 years later, look at the impact that Trigger Happy TV had and revisit it on stage?
Well, it feels very old for a start. I feel very old. It's just odd. I actually got all the people that made it with me. We all went to the pub, where we used to have a lot of the ideas off Charing Cross Road. We went there on the 14th of January this year for a reunion, and I hadn't seen a lot of them since, and it was crazy. Like, all my runners are now BAFTA award-winning directors and stuff. I would say almost everyone that worked on Trigger has done really well, which is great, and they're all lovely, so that was really nice. But it was just so odd. I just remembered so many things that I'd forgotten about. And looking back on Trigger, one of the reasons why I'm doing this 25th anniversary is firstly because I'll be dead soon, so you might as well. But also, I didn't really enjoy it at the time. I did enjoy it. Like, I'm immensely proud of Trigger Happy, and it was just a work of total love and passion and devotion. And just for 2.5 years, Sam and I, who I made it with, we had control of everything of it. And it was one of those great moments when no one knows who you are. No one cares. So you just totally get left alone. And I think that was one of its secrets. The moment you become a hit, everyone gets involved. And the one thing I've learned, well, there's lots of things I've learned, but the one thing I've learned is you can't make comedy by committee. And so this is quite a selfish opportunity, really, this 25th anniversary, for me to actually look back and, I've always thought, well, that was brilliant, but I'll move on and I want to do other stuff and I've done other things. And I just want to sit there and go, you know what, I'm really proud of that. So that's really what it's about.
Yeah. Well, we're going to touch on the live tour in a second.
Yeah.
But,
I'm glad because I have no idea what it's going to be. Yeah. I mean, I kind of do, but yeah. But you did pick out a problem, yeah.
But going back to 25 years ago or slightly more, how did it get commissioned? Can you take us through the process that led up to the commission?
Yeah, so I was working at Paramount Comedy Channel, which at the time was a really weird place to be working because it was a cable channel primarily showing American imports, Frasier, Friends, that kind of stuff. But it had this kind of weird little life in what was called the interstitials, which is a word I'd never really known, but, in between, in the breaks. And it was pretty much the brainchild of a woman called Mafanwi Moore, who I'm a big fan of, and she was like a real nurturer for me. And I got a job on there as an AP with a show which was presented by Dominic Diamond, the Games Master, and it was a kind of rubbish sort of satirical look at the week, and it wasn't very good. But that got me into Paramount Comedy Channel, and I started. Basically, there was a guy who'd taken over as the head of marketing and advertising there, and he had an advertising budget, and he had a certain amount of money to spend to promote a comedy channel. And I went to him and I said, rather than just putting an ad out saying Paramount Comedy Channel, we're funny, I'm starting to do these, because I'd come from a political background. I'd worked in Parliament, I'd been a diplomat, and I was really interested in Cool Britannia was happening, and I was really interested in taking the mickey out of that. And I said to him, why don't we do funny stuff that gets in the news? And you won't have to say Paramount's funny because the funny stuff will be there. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, give me an opportunity to do something. So anyway, the first thing we ever did, Peter Mandelson, our current ambassador in Washington, at the time was the New Labour spin lord, and he was the Prince of Darkness was his name. And so I thought, well, a Prince of Darkness would have to have an underworld fan club. So I made up a fan club of me dressed as a vampire. There was a skull, there was Frankenstein, a couple of other ghouls. And we found out from my news contacts where he was going to be one day, and we just followed him around all day. And everywhere we went, we're just like, we love you, Peter, like this. And the secret, we brought our own paparazzi with us, so we knew we had those photos. And the next day, front cover of The Guardian was this picture of a startled Peter Mandelson getting out of a Jaguar, surrounded by this bunch of freaks who loved him. And it just said everything. And then underneath it said Paramount Comedy Channel explaining it. It was perfect, And so that was it, really. This guy said, great, go and do that because that's amazing. And so I spent about a year doing a lot of trigger-happy type hits, but political. So we really targeted Peter Mandelson. We put a Millennium Dome in his garden. There was an election going on where there were lots of fluffies doing stuff. There was a Tory chicken who was following people around, telling people, goading one of the politicians into a debate. So we kidnapped that chicken. We did lots of stuff like that. Yeah. And anyway, this slowly got to Channel 4's attention because this stuff we called it War of the Flea. Because War of the Flea is a great expression about guerrilla warfare. If there's a dog and a flea bites the dog, nothing. But if 1,000 fleas bite the dog, it dies. And so we were like this little flea just doing stuff to the establishment, really, and having a lot of fun. Long story short, it started to get quite cult. I have to say that very carefully, and put it out a lot. And people like Noel Gallagher and Liam used to watch it and told me they used to watch it. It got quite cult, and I put lots of cool music in it as well. And it was just a really great thing. And then we made it into a little show, and someone took over Paramount and just looked at this and said, have you got consents to do all this? And I said, no, not at all. And he said, you can never show this. So I had to steal it out of Paramount Comedy Channel. I went into their documents lab, their tape lab, and I nicked all my rushes. And I went to Channel 4 and I said, look, this is what I'm doing at the moment. And so there's a woman called Caroline Leddy who was in charge. She was the commissioning editor, and she looked at it and she said, I really love this, what you're doing. She goes, but I think she'd just finished doing Brass Eye, and I think she just didn't want to have any more legal problems. She said, can you do what you're doing like here, but can you just make it funny? Like, don't make it satirical. And that was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because I think I would always, probably being me, try to prove to people, look, I'm so smart, I'm doing satire, because that's what you're supposed to do if you're smart. And actually this gave me just freedom just to make stupid. And really the only two rules in Trigger Happy was I called it television verite. It all had to happen in one frame so that people believed what they're seeing. And it was funny. And so there was a thing called Comedy Lab, and Channel 4 were basically giving first people who'd never had a show before the opportunity to do a pilot, which would go on air. So we got given one of those as Trigger Happy. And then I think the second thing I did that was quite smart, if I may say so, because it was the first time I had a proper show, we were offered half an hour. And I said, I don't want half an hour, I want 15 minutes. And so they gave the other 15 minutes to someone else, which is suicide, really. I mean, why would you do that? But I just knew that half an hour would probably, at the stage we were at, be a bit flabby. And I wanted to make a really tight, just unstoppable 15 minutes. Yeah. And I did. And I was so proud of it. And then that's how it happened.
Right. And so how did you produce it? Because Was it a really low budget that you were working to, right from day one, or was it? I mean, presumably it was the first proper budget you were working to, so it probably felt like a lot.
Well, I mean, weirdly, Paramount, we had quite a decent budget in a sense because we had an advertising budget, so advertising is way more than telly, but it wasn't crazy. But we had enough money at Paramount to make big props and stuff like that. And then the actual Comedy Lab one, I think, was pretty minimal, the budget. But then the first Trigger Happy budget, I think, was pretty big, really. I mean, I know what it was. I mean, it was amazing to me.
Yeah.
And basically, a lot of stuff happened just around the time, 1999, 2000, so 1999 when we were filming, that made Trigger Happy possible, that wouldn't have made it happen before. And I always equate it a bit to punk in the sense that people used to watch professional musicians play, and suddenly someone said, just go into your garage, play 3 chords, and you can do it. And what happened was just at that moment, a camera came out called the Sony VX1000, and it was probably the first, I think it was I'm not technical, but I think it was a 3-chip or something. So it meant, I mean, if you look at the quality now, it's shocking, but it was just good enough that you could film stuff and put it out on the telly.
Just broadcast quality enough, right?
Yeah. Whereas before, like 2 years before, if I'd have been making Trigger Happy, I would have had to hire, and nothing wrong with hiring people, but, we'd have to hire a proper cameraman, proper sound man. They would be of a certain age. They would want their breaks. They would cost us a fortune. Whereas actually, we just bought this camera for, I think, £1,000. We then rented it back to the production, and we just filmed. And we filmed insane amounts, and we learned on the go. Because most people's first show is it's their time constraints, and they get the best of what they can. We just filmed. There was no filler in Trigger Happy. We just filmed and filmed and filmed till every moment was something we wanted to do. So we filmed for about 8 months, I think. And that's one of the reasons Trigger Happy, I think, really stands the test of time, along with the edit. I mean, I just spent the edit was all about it for me. I had my best friend as the editor by chance. I used to be a runner in an edit facility, and he started with me. And then he went on to be an editor, where I went off and did weird stuff, and then came back to Trigger Happy. So again, even that, when you're sitting with an editor and you don't really know what you're doing, because you don't, and you don't want to say, oh, do you mind doing that? And then they noodle away for half an hour, and then you look at it and go, oh, it's a bit rubbish. But because it's my mate, I can just say, no, that's rubbish. And we just could talk really. Yeah. And he and I used to be in a band together, so it was all about music. So Trigger Happy was all about the music as well. So I chose every track with love. I was more into the music than the comedy, and I'd cut the music first before the joke sometimes, whereas often you cut your show and then drop the music on. I didn't. I knew the bit of music I wanted to use, and I'd stretch jokes to do that. I wanted Trigger Happy. Sorry, I just got to get this off my chest because I love all this. But growing up, I used to watch Hidden Camera all the time, very early Candid Camera, stuff like that. It was very surreal. And then things like Beatles About and Game for a Laugh, I'm sure they were brilliantly made, but it was so naff and low comedy. And I think I always felt Hidden Camera, and I don't call it pranking because I'm a ponce, I think it's Hidden Camera. I felt it was like the lowest rung in TV comedy. If you were smart, you'd do screenplays or you'd write sitcoms. And I thought, why? Why should it be? This is an art form, and a sort of unacknowledged art form. So I always wanted to make it really cool, I think. I wanted to make something beautiful. I wanted to make it a bit arty. But all that sounds like there was this great plan. It wasn't. It sort of happened organically. But it was all about there were no rules, really. So I don't think we had it. It was a bit like, and again, I'm absolutely not comparing myself to the Beatles, but it's the same way that I just watched that amazing Peter Jackson thing about the Beatles. And it's the fact that they weren't formally trained. They weren't proper musicians. So they meant they could break rules. And I wasn't a stand-up. I'd never done comedy before. So I don't think I knew that you weren't supposed to do things. That's why.
There was no convention, right?
No convention. But on the flip side, there was no one to ask advice for. Certainly after it got big, I longed for someone to go, what the hell do I do now?
And did Channel 4 just kind of let you alone with it?
Yes, it was extraordinary. So we went, it really was. I mean, I now, this is why I don't appreciate it. It's only now I appreciate it. It was the first proper show I'd done. And they just said, yep, right, you can go and make 6 half hours. I'm like, fine. And then literally, that was it. We just went off and we filmed, as I said, for 7-8 months, I think. And then we went into an edit, probably 4 months. And then that was probably the first time Channel 4 saw anything. It was pretty much the finished product. And we were incredibly lucky that Channel 4 had a blanket agreement for music, because music was so important. So we didn't have to pay anything. That became a problem when, I didn't realise, but it sold abroad well. And suddenly you had to have a sound alike because it would cost a fortune to license the music. Yeah. But I remember literally handing it in to Channel 4, and there was a long silence, a week or so, and then they came back. Well, two things. They came back firstly saying, "Are you sure about the music?" And I was like, I don't think I've ever been more sure about anything in my life. But they made us go to a focus group because we found out, and I think this is true, that we were the first comedy show ever with a soundtrack. It seems like a weird thing, but we just were. And I don't think they knew what that was about. I don't know why, because Karen Leddy had exceptional music taste and stuff. But anyway, we went to a focus group, and I remember looking through a sort of mirror as like 10 Essex housewives watched it and laughed. But they went, "Oh, the music's sad, isn't it? It'd be better with like cartoon music." I go, "What?" So I was so glad I didn't do that. But anyway, so after we got through that, and then they said it's going out on Friday nights between Friends and Frasier. And I remember thinking, even then I was naive. I thought, well, okay, well, that's, you make a TV show and that's what happened. I didn't realize how amazing that was. But yeah, it really was that. And then it went crazy. And I had no idea. It's only now I talk to people and they go, "Oh, Monday morning we used to all talk about it." And it was a point. You don't know that when you're stuck in the maelstrom. The only reason I knew something weird had happened was it went out on the Friday, and that next Monday I was on a train and no one knew who I was. And that ringtone went off. And even that ringtone I'd chosen, it was called Grand Valse, and I chose it because I hated it and I wanted it to be annoying. But between us filming and it going out, Nokia had just made it the default Nokia tune, not to anything to do with us. So it became this subliminal guerrilla ad for us. But anyway, that ringtone went off, and 3 people on the carriage, not knowing I was there, stood up and went, "Hello, I'm on the train." And I was like, and I just, honestly, that very moment, I thought, whoa, something shifted here, like something extraordinary happened.
It seems like lots of different things shifted into, the planets aligned or whatever.
I cannot tell you the amount of sliding doors, the moments. For instance, when the guy at Paramount said to me, "Fine, I've got this advertising budget, do you want to go make this stuff?" I thought, great, but who do I make it with? And I went back, saw my girlfriend, and I said, "It's unbelievable. This guy's like going to pay for me to go off and harass the government and stuff. But I need a kind of partner in art. I need someone who can do the filming for me." And we're in this pub called The Engineer in Primrose Hill.
Yeah.
And the barman is sitting there drying the pint. I can remember it now. And he's listening. I can see him listening. Oh, piss off. And then he just leans in. He goes, "I can do that." I go, "What?" He goes, "I can do that. I'm a cameraman." I go, "What? You've heard what I'm doing?" He goes, "Yeah, I'd love to do that." I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Well, can you come in and I'll introduce you to people at Paramount on Monday?" And that was Sam, who was an artist. He'd never done any filming for in his life, but he's completely on the spectrum. And when he decides to do something, so he just read the leaflet, the booklet,
seriously,
bought a VX1000 and then came in on that day. And we just were very different. And it's a tricky relationship, but that's what makes the friction and makes it amazing.
Was he fronting up to you then? I mean, the fact that he'd never really, I
think he
done
was
much camera work. Or
he hadn't done any camera work.
He hadn't done any.
I mean, we found out at the end of the first Trigger Happy, we used to have a thing called a beach box, which we'd attach to the camera, and that then linked the camera to our basic radio mics. We didn't know what we were doing. Cameron, he'd never done sound. We found out at the end of the first series of Trigger Happy that Sam had put it on a setting that the radio mic just expanded until it heard a sound, which is a thing you can have. Normally you just have it like this. I don't even know when I'm telling you now.
Yeah.
And we made the whole series like that. We had no idea what we were doing. And there was part of that was we sort of loved it. Like, that's why I talk about punk. Like, when we got costumes, we wouldn't get a costume made. We'd go to Escapade in Camden and try and rent them. And occasionally we'd want the fighting dogs. And they weren't there. They'd be out on a stag party or something. We didn't know what we were doing. And I think that was kind of our defense, because we did feel like imposters. Like, we hadn't done telly. We didn't know what to do, but then no one had. Yeah. So I don't know.
There's a certain element of this thinking, about today's content industry and people going digital first and YouTube and being able to create your own content 100%. And stick it out on YouTube. There's a bit of a parallel, really, isn't there? I mean,
in a funny way, I think we were the fulcrum, if you want me to be a ponce, between old school telly and YouTube in a sense, because if Trigger Happy had been invented or we'd come up with it 4 years later, we would have probably just made it all ourselves. Now, it would have lacked a lot of things because of that. We'd have probably got a more global audience immediately, but we'd have lacked a lot of things. I mean, just that water cooler moment, that moment when in 2000 there still really were only 4 channels, and you could grab people and it grabbed a moment. And Trigger Happy is very much of a moment. If you watch it, I got approached by the Soho Society the other day, who were thinking of giving us a memorial, not a memorial, a monument, because we'd captured this, because we filmed in almost every street in Soho. We'd sort of captured that turn of the millennium moment. And in fact, just before here, I was having lunch with Sam, who I made it with, because we're doing the 25th show together. And we're just howling with laughter, which is awful for other people to watch. But we just are. And I remember why we loved making Trigger Happy. And we were talking about every time I come to London now, another building has just disappeared. And a lot of them are sort of, we always used to think if we film something for Trigger Happy, we might as well film it in front of something iconic. And so we'd find ourselves battling with Banksy right at the time. When Banksy was just coming out, I'd think, I want to go down on the South Bank. And let's, if we're going to talk to a random person, let's do it with Westminster in the background. And we get there and there'd be a Banksy stencil saying, not another bloody photo opportunity, whatever.
Yeah.
So I always felt that Banksy and I, because the whole concept of Trigger, it was a bit like, we were a parallel universe to be Ponzi, but just slightly under the norm. And we'd occasionally just burst out into real life of these surreal moments. And that's what we wanted to do with people.
Yeah. And tell us about how the giant mobile phone came about then. Well,
again, that was just, nothing was planned. Everything looks like it was a massive plan. Sam and I went to the pub. It was in Edgware Road, I think it was. And I think we went to Marouche, which is my favourite Lebanese restaurant. And we were walking out and we'd had a couple of beers. And we walked past a mobile phone display store. And outside was a sort of model displaying this cool new phone. And it wasn't a Nokia, as everyone thinks it is. It was actually what was called a Sony Mars bar, if people remember. I had one. It was so cool. And it was a sort of 2.5 foot plastic, really heavy display model. And I just picked it up and then started sort of talking into it. And Sam took a photo of me. And then, I nicked it. We just got on a bus and then we were just looking at it and playing with it. And we got to Oxford Street. And when we got off at Oxford Street to go towards our offices, there was a DJ called John O'Coleman. He was an Australian DJ. And he was being filmed live on Oxford Street in an interview, TV interview. And I had the phone, and I just went up behind, and I went, hello! And so somewhere in the ether, there is the moment the joke was born, whether, that's a big deal or not, but it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
And that made Sam laugh, which is all Trigger Happy was about, me trying to make Sam laugh. And then we went back to the office, and it sat on the windowsill for a year and a half, while we were making Trigger Happy. And then I remembered it, and I looked at it, and I thought, actually, and it wasn't, when we started doing it, it wasn't a comment on mobile phone culture. I used it to interrupt things I hated, like opera and theatre and just poncy things.
Yeah.
And that's what it was about, really, when it started. Yeah. I kind of didn't like the big mobile in the end because it did me in massive service, because people that hadn't seen Trigger Happy would probably know about the big mobile phone. So it was a great advert for Trigger Happy. Every time that ringtone went off, it was great. But on the flip side, it was kind of dominated the show, whereas actually it was very different from the rest of the show. So I used to put it before the title sequence, because the rest of the show was essentially me dressed as a squirrel having a shattering nervous breakdown to Jacques Brel, whereas the bit, that was a bit shouty. They were very different sort of mindsets.
Yeah. The snail is one of my favourites.
Well, the snail is my all-time favourite. And the snail, we were just discussing this, Sam and I, actually, because the snail, I remember exactly how that happened. And, I always say, everyone goes to the pub. Probably not everyone goes to the pub, gets drunk, and then says, let's dress up as a snail. But everyone has stupid ideas.
Yeah.
But once you're doing that show, you're just thinking all the time, Milkman, you're looking like that. And I was in the pub, it was called the Cock and Bottle, I remember it. And we were sitting in there, and I suddenly went, Sam, snail. He went, and he got what I was saying. He's like, oh my God. And I go, I just walk up dressed as a snail, and it's Britain, everyone will stop. Whereas in America, people would just run me over or beat me up. And then I'll just crawl really slowly across. And then when I get up, I'll walk off again. And what was amazing was normally you'd have that idea, but then you'd forget about it. But I literally just made a call, and I had someone ready. And 3 days later, we had this amazing snail costume. And 5 days later, I was crawling across Redcliffe Gardens, I loved it.
Well, I tell you what, you're referencing some of the best pubs in London.
Yeah,
by the way.
it's all
the
about
Cock
pubs.
and Bottle is also
Cock and Bottle was
my
my local for a long time, and then Redcliffe Gardens. Weirdly, I don't know if a lot of Trigger Happy, a lot of the celebs we did was about me wanting to meet people, and a lot of the places we filmed was some sort of subconscious history through my. Sort of ride through my history of London, because the snail was right outside Café des Artistes in Redcliffe Gardens, which is where I used to go. My band played there and stuff. So in a way, I think I've sort of shoehorned a video tour of my life into Trigger.
Want to get ahead in digital-first content? The Drop is the go-to newsletter for industry professionals, delivering insider news, trends, and insights straight to your inbox. Navigate the fast-changing landscape of digital-first production, distribution, and monetization. Sign up now for free at dropmedia.co.uk and stay informed with The Drop. Coming back to Channel 4 then, and all the stuff that you did was either in parks, on streets, or on zebra crossings and public places, as you say, iconic places. Did you ever get the permission, or was it completely guerrilla?
Never. It was totally guerrilla, and that was an issue for us actually. So because obviously we had to get consents afterwards, and a consent form is so. I don't know why anyone would ever sign a consent form, especially when someone's just approached them dressed as a squirrel or something like that. But we had I had two very good runners, one of whom, Al Campbell, then became Barry Shitpeas in what's it called, in Screen Wipe, and is now just an amazing director and stuff. And Al was just charming and really sweet. So we'd send him in if it was like someone that he could charm. And we also had a girl runner who was also very charming. So depending who they were, we'd go in and talk to them. But permission-wise, I mean, God, it's probably quite, I don't know if I can say now, but there were probably quite a few faked permissions in the sense of Channel 4 would occasionally go, have you got permission to film? They go, oh, yeah. And actually, I have a character in Trigger Happy. If I have a fake name, it's Mr. Gund. Like I'd always say Mr. Gund is here. And Mr. Gund came because whenever anyone asked us if someone had, have we asked permission to film in there, I go, yeah. And who do you speak to? Mr. Gund. We'd always just say Mr. Gund. But of course, we learned later on, because what we wanted, we just didn't, everything had to be real, and it was riffed. But it meant it was so tiring because you'd do something and then you'd never be able to get permission, no one would sign. So we got a bit better towards the end of series 2 when we realised that there might be a halfway house. So sometimes if we were doing something in a shop, we would try and contact the owner of the shop or the manager of the shop and say, look, we'd like to do something in your shop, but we're not going to tell you what or who to. Right. And then at least if we had permission from them, then afterwards that made getting permission a lot easier and stuff. Yeah. But no, I think it was seat of the pants stuff. There was quite a lot. Yeah. A strange man called Michel Souris signed a lot of consent forms as well, but we won't go into that. Michael Mouse.
So tell us about the live tour then. How are you going to make this work on stage?
No idea. I have no idea whatsoever. Originally, the idea of the live thing came from, I'm not like, it used to annoy me that people would go to Edinburgh and get stand-ups and then put them on telly, because that's a completely different skill set. Yeah. In the same way that I think comedians were probably a bit irritated by me for many reasons, but when I just popped up on Trigger Happy, I hadn't paid my dues, I hadn't been a stand-up, hadn't been to Edinburgh, I wasn't in the footlights, all that crap. And I just thought, no, this is my skill, I'm good at telly and you're good at that, don't mix. But in the last, and genuinely, for a man that can crawl across the street dressed as a snail, I was terrified about live appearances. Like coming as me was just, I couldn't do it. It would just fill me with fear. And then, I write travel books now. I've written a lot of travel books. And every time I finish my book, I do a tour with it. And I've done my 10,000 hours now. And I've learnt, I think, to be good on stage, certainly with the stuff I'm doing there. And I feel a lot more comfortable on stage. And I've learnt how to work an audience to an extent. I've learned a lot of stuff, which is going to come very useful. And so when I was talking to Sam about the 25th, meanwhile, he's gone off to America and been an advertising director, and he's learned. So both of us knew nothing at the beginning, and now we have certain tangible skills. So we were talking about what we could do with the Trigger Happy tour, and there were two issues, really. One is, if we were the Fast Show, and I think they're doing this, you just get I went to see Monty Python, you just get your classic sketches and you do them, and if it's a nostalgia fest, everyone's just pleased to see them.
It's a sketch show, basically.
Well, it is a sketch show, yeah. But also, it's about whether you're doing something different or whether you're celebrating it. And what really happened to us is the Hummingbird Cinema in Birmingham had a retrospective on Trigger Happy, and they invited me and Sam, and they asked us our favourite episode, and then they basically showed it on a big screen with loud music, because the music's all about it. And we watched it with a whole lot of Trigger Happy fans. And firstly, it really stood the test of time. And secondly, I still would put an episode of Trigger Happy up against anything else in front of an audience and think you get more laughs. I would say that, but I genuinely, it still gets it. And I thought there's something about this, because when you watch Trigger Happy originally, you would have watched it on your own or with a friend or whatever, or at home. But there's something about a communal setting that is kind of interesting anyway, because it's a different dynamic and people are
there's
laughing.
no laughter tracks, obviously, on the original.
Oh my God, of course not. No. I went
Yeah.
to ITV and they forced me to have a laughter track. Let's not get into that. But no, why would you? You know, I mean, firstly, laughter tracks, you know what they are, don't you? Most laughter tracks are recording of audiences from the 1960s or the 1970s. So you're listening to dead people laughing. I mean, God. But no. And so I just thought it was an incredible thing to see people doing it. And so we suddenly thought, well, firstly, it's the 25th, so we can be a bit nostalgic. It's okay, because I'm such a indie kid. The way I look at it is there's two types of people. There's in show business. This is what I've learned. And I always do musical stuff. There's Coldplay and Radiohead. Radiohead get massively successful, but then get all embarrassed and indie angsty about it, art school. Yeah. And then they spend the next 7 albums trying to alienate their whole audience. Whereas Coldplay just think, well, these are great. Let's just do bigger and better. And I'm very much Radiohead.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And so I sort of felt embarrassed about looking back at it. The tour is about saying, you know what? I'm proud of it. People seem to really have a love for it. So let's enjoy it. And if we're going to enjoy it, let's do that. And so originally the tour was going to be me showing clips and me saying, look, here's explaining what went wrong, how clips came apart, all the things you probably didn't spot, maybe some bloopers and outtakes, and then talking about it and then showing it to people, which would have been okay. It would have been fine. And maybe a Q&A. And then I just thought, no, we've got to do something more interesting than that. And so we have. So we've got 3 elements now. One is that, which there will be a big screen, and I will be showing footage, some unseen. Sam just found all the rushes from our pilot, which is insane. And there are people I don't even remember doing, like Kate Adie and stuff. So we'll be showing stuff like that. And then there are going to be appearances by some of the characters themselves, which is obviously me, 25 years later, like what they've been up to. So they will come on and interact. And then thirdly, obviously, it's trigger happy. I think people will expect it. And this is what's interesting, because it's not like they don't know that we're going to do something to them, but we're going to play with the audience and have fun with the audience. But I think it's just always done very straight. But obviously, unless they're really thick, they will know what's going on. So it's a sort of suspend your disbelief. But I just want people to think, we've still got an idea for a Trigger Happy film. And the idea was, if you liked watching Trigger Happy, come and be in the film. And in a sense, that's what this show is. Like, if you loved watching Trigger Happy, well, come and be in an ep. Who knows? You might have the park warden sitting next to you or stuff like that. I don't really know, to be honest. Yeah. So I think it still feels a bit seat of the pants. And I still think I don't really know what the rules are, because there are no rules for making a hidden camera show a live show, because half the stars in the hidden camera show are people on the street. So maybe the rule is, we'll make the audience the other half. I don't know. Yeah. It could be a massive disaster, but that's my life, really.
It's just interesting what you were saying about music and looking back 25 years. And it was really at the time of Cool Britannia, wasn't it? I mean, it was really...
Just on the... Yeah, but I think we were just getting sick of Cool Britannia. But yeah, Cool Britannia was 97, really. And I think it was the honeymoon was over, really.
But there's a certain element of, during that time, comedy and music went really, really hand in hand, didn't it? It went really well together. And
interesting. I don't think it did. I mean, I like to think we did something about that. There definitely was a moment after Trigger when, you had Ali G and you had maybe even Little Britain, and people started appearing in pop videos and stuff like that. Yeah. But I kind of think we were the first sort of real mashup. I mean, it's interesting. So we were really influenced by people called the Jerky Boys, and they were 2 guys who did a whole lot of funny phone call CDs, and they worked in the MTV press office early 90s, and they really influenced bands. Bands would listen to these CDs when they're touring. Radiohead's first album, Pablo Honey, is named after a Jerky Boy sketch and stuff. So there was this kind of cross thing, but I still felt comedy was there was alternative comedy, and there was comedy. And I didn't feel part of that comedy world. I felt much more part. I'd been in a band. I felt much more like an indie person than a comedy person. Yeah. And that's where I think we slightly changed. But yes, suddenly everything exploded around then. And it was like Channel 4 was a gold mine. It was just making great, interesting... It was making stuff that I wanted to watch, which... doesn't happen now, but that's probably because I'm 25 years older and they don't want me to watch, But I've always only ever tried to make, whether it's books or what I'm doing, what I want to watch. And that's all you can do, really.
If you could go back and speak to Dom Joly in 1998, would there be any advice that you would give?
So much advice. Weirdly, I just had to do a thing for the big issue. I had to write a letter to my 16-year-old self, which mainly involved buying Bitcoin. That was it, really. But so what would I say? I think the most valuable thing I've ever learned is never make a massive decision, certainly a sort of career-changing decision, right off on the back of finishing something. So, whether you're making an album or you're making a TV show or, it's like all those people that have sort of spent 5 months in Barbados making an album and then they just never want to see each other again and the band breaks up. I think I never took Trigger Happy quite seriously enough. I never thought it was a proper skill. I just thought we were really lucky, and we were lucky in a lot of ways. But in hindsight, I didn't realize how lucky you are to find a format that just suits everything you're good at. And I've been struggling since. I've never found anything that's as perfect as that. And I kind of just said, right, that's it. I finished Trigger Happy. I'm doing something else. And in hindsight, I would have probably said, why don't we do a deal? I'll do you a Trigger Happy every 4 years. And in between, I can get all the weird stuff out of my system. But I kind of did it like, I'm leaving the band. I'm going off to do something else. So I think that would be one, I think. But yeah, I don't know, advice. But apart from that, my career's been absolutely shambolic. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I've gone all over the shop. It just looks mental. It really does. But I've had the best. The way I always look at it is, if you'd have told me in 1998, these are the things you'll have done for the next 25 years, I'd have bitten your hand off. I've had the craziest, most amazing life. But yeah, I don't know. So no, not really changed much.
So you've also you mentioned earlier on about your travel books, and you've done a lot of travel, and that's your passion, right? So tell us about that. What's it's almost been a sort of a second career.
Well, it's not almost. It is my second career. For the last 12 years, that's what I've done. Since 2010, I've written. This will be my 6th proper travel book coming out that I'm writing at the moment on the pursuit of happiness. I've just been in Rishikesh trying to get into yoga, and I can tell you it was a strong no. But I ended up on the ashram that the Beatles went to in '68, and which basically kick-started Western attitudes to religion and stuff. And that was honestly like a pilgrimage to me. It was amazing. It's where they wrote the White Album and stuff. But yeah, I wrote my first travel book because basically growing up, I grew up in Lebanon, in a very weird place in the middle of a war, which probably explains my odd take on humor and stuff. But growing up in Lebanon, there were 4 things really career-wise, people I was looking around: diplomats, foreign correspondents, travel writers, and spies. And I might have been all 4, I might have not, but I've certainly been a diplomat. I was definitely a foreign correspondent. I was a spy in Trigger Happy, and travel writer was always something I wanted to be. And so the one thing that Trigger Happy did for me was open doors, and it allowed me to try things. And the Sunday Times approached me and asked me if I'd like to write something for them. And I knew they were approaching me because I was Trigger Happy guy. But I also knew they wouldn't keep me writing if I wasn't any good. And so I started writing stuff for them. And it's what I was born to do. I just loved it. And then I finally came out, I thought, what is my USP in travel? And I realized what it was. It was this thing, I read this thing in The Guardian, and it was basically, in 1977, there was a thing called the Jonestown Massacre in Guyana. And it was where Jim Jones took his cult of 800 people to this jungle place and in the end made them drink the Kool-Aid, and they all committed mass suicide. And Guyana is widely seen as the most inhospitable country on earth. It's insane. It's got nothing there. It's jungles and crocodiles and swamps. And the Minister of Tourism for Guyana had quite a difficult job, and he set up someone in London whose job was to encourage tourism. And The Guardian wrote about this and said the guy is desperate. What he's trying to do now is turn Jonestown into a hotel. And they said, this is an incredible example of what is being called dark tourism. And I thought, that's it. That's what I am, a dark tourist. So I wrote a book called The Dark Tourist, which Netflix then weirdly borrowed after I pitched it to them, and called it Dark Tourist, not The Dark Tourist. And in that, I went to North Korea on a coach holiday. I went skiing in Iran. I weekended in Chernobyl. I drove into Syria, and I went on an assassination vacation around America. And I just thought, this is it. This is what I love doing. And it's still, to this day, what I love doing. And since then, I've been to 108 countries. My next book was called Scary Monsters, and I went around the world sort of looking for legendary monsters, but more looking at the people that are obsessed with them. So I went to the Congo after this thing called the Mekele Mbembe. I went to the Himalayas to look for the Yeti and thought I was Tintin. Went to Japan to look at a radioactive monster. Then
Bigfoot?
I did Bigfoot. I mean, Bigfoot was where it started, because when I was a kid, I watched and read Arthur C. Clarke, and there's that famous 16 mil footage of him walking. And I went to Notice Creek, and the best thing I've ever brought back from any of my travels is I have one of the original plaster casts of Bigfoot from Notice Creek, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And then I wrote a book where I walked across Lebanon, where I grew up. I walked from the Israeli border to the Syrian border. It took me 27 days, and I walked across that. I did a road trip around England called Such Miserable Weather. And then my last book was The Conspiracy Tourist, where I went around the world hanging out with conspiracy theorists, because it just seems to me conspiracy to have gone from being fun and eccentric to really dangerous. I took a flat earther to the edge of supposedly the square flat earth on an island called Fogo in Newfoundland. There's a theory that Finland doesn't exist, so I went there. It does. Lots of stuff like that. And don't get me on Denver International Airport. It's the greatest conspiracy theory ever. And then my new book's on happiness, because I need to get away from conspiracy theory. But it just irritates me. This is what I want to do. I love writing more than anything in the world. And if I'd have to kill Bill Bryson and a couple of other people, but if I could just make my living from writing, that's all I'd do. But I just long to make proper travel shows that I want to make, which they don't seem to exist anymore. I made a series called Happy Hour for Sky, and it was the wrong channel, because really Happy Hour was a sort of satire of, it was an early Idiot Abroad, really. It was like it was a Mickey take of all those travel shows, because it was a serious travel show, but we were looking into alcohol, and we were taking the Mickey out of all the tropes in travel shows of, the fact that you only ever arrive or leave anywhere at sunset, or, in that magic hour, just all those things. And I loved that show. I thought it was brilliant. So I really, really, I know the show I want to make. I want to make a hybrid between people that like my humor and people that enjoy my books. And that's really what all my tours have been, because half the people who come to my tours, people read my books, the other half are Trigger Happy fans. And all I'm saying is, if you like one, you'll like the other. But I want to be able to combine them both. That's what I want to do.
All right.
So get on with it.
Yeah, great opportunity
I'll
there.
be dead soon.
Any commissioners out there?
There you go. Hello.
Yeah.
Dom Joly, 1L.
All right. To finish, Dom, I've got 5 quick-fire questions for
Amazing.
you. All right. So here we go. What's the closest you ever came to getting arrested filming Trigger Happy?
Closest? I got arrested loads of times. I tended to get arrested a lot abroad. British police were rubbish. I did a sketch in a place called Brockhampton in the Cotswolds, near where I live now, actually, dressed as a burglar, where I was asking an old lady whether a house was unoccupied, because I was interested in the architecture. And she answered quite nicely and then signed a consent form. So we thought she knew what was going on. But then we drove off. She then rang the police and said there was a black man wandering around the village, brandishing a shotgun and threatening to take out the post office. So the Cotswold Flying Squad was sent out to look for us. We didn't know this. We were driving around. We were in a van. We had a dog and a false turd on the roof rack. We were not difficult to spot. In the end, we had to hand ourselves in. We got a call from our production manager saying they're looking for us. So we had to hand ourselves in at the Bourton-on-the-Water police station. But I got arrested a lot abroad. I got arrested on the Empire State Building. I did a thing as the spy where we were doing an exchange, and I got arrested there and actually put in. They have their own little prison cell in the Empire State Building, which was quite good. I got arrested in Bruges, dressed as an English policeman. I don't really know why. Whenever we went abroad, we get arrested, which was good.
Okay, what's the one prank? And I know you don't like the word prank, but
hidden camera artwork.
But what's the one hidden camera artwork you never got away with, but you wish you had? The one,
Okay, well, that's so good. So, well, I mean, there's the one I love the most. You mean the one that we haven't done, or the one that we couldn't show?
The one that you wanted to get, you wanted to do, but you just couldn't get away with. You couldn't make it work for whatever reason, or it didn't happen. Yeah,
well, there were so many of those. So there's one. Well, there's two. I mean, one I did, but I could never show. And it was, we were walking past a garden party once. We'd just finished filming on the King's Road, and we were walking down, and there was this big barracks called the Duke of York Barracks, and the gates were open, and there was a big garden party going on. So Sam and I just walked in, blagging free drink. He had the camera on him, and I had a mic. And suddenly in the far corner, we spotted Fergie, like Sarah Ferguson. So we just thought, sod it, let's do it. So we just made a beeline for her. She was on her own, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I just stuck a microphone in her face. Sam puts camera up, and I go, Buenos dias, Your Highness. You are live on Good Morning Mexico. Do you have anything to say to the people of Mexico? And she just started waffling on to this tiny camera as though she was talking to Mexico live. And then we went to an ad break where we told her to freeze so that when we came back, we'd be in the same place. So there were these 2 minutes where me, Sam, and Ferguson was just like completely frozen. And then her people came and took her away and stuff. And we got a fax from Mishcon Rea by the time we'd come back. That was a nightmare. But the one I really wanted to do, and I don't know why I ever did it, and it was such a stupid joke, but it still makes me laugh, was I wanted to go to one of those seafood caravan stalls where, there's just a shelf and people, they're selling caravan stalls. And the joke was basically I'd go up and they could just see the top of me and I'd say, do you have any crab claws? And they go, no. And then I would just lift my hands and I would have massive crab claws and I go, well, I do. That's really all Trigger Happy is. And we had the crab claws made and then we filmed it. I think we tried it 4 times and every time something went wrong. Like just as we were about to do it, the caravan would close, and we never got to do it. Now, I don't think the world of comedy is the worst for me not having done it, but it was something I longed to do.
Well, it sounds like you're pretty good at PR, Dom, and I'm sure you'll be doing lots of stunts around your live tour, so there might
you've
be...
missed it then.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the most outrageous reaction you've ever had from somebody when you've been filming?
Well, we didn't really have outrageous reactions because... I think one of the whole points of Trigger Happy, one of the things that annoyed me about old hidden camera was that it was about making people angry, the Beadle method. And that's easy. Whereas for me, it wasn't about, if someone went away from us filming them angry, or we hadn't done it right, I wanted them to be confused and then to be quite relieved when they found out. I think what's interesting, and getting back to consents, is one of the main reasons people didn't sign consent forms might be a surprise to people. It's because there's a vast amount of people wandering around in public with someone that's either not their husband or their wife. And that was probably the main reason people would not sign consent forms. Really? So there was one guy in particular in Bourton-on-the-Water, and we did a joke, and then he didn't recognise me, and then the guy went up afterwards to get the consent. And when he found out, he went, oh, my God, Trigger Happy. I love Trigger Happy. Was that Tom Joly? Oh, my God, I can't believe it. And then suddenly it clicked and he went, what, you're filming? We go, well, yeah, that's how it works. He goes, oh, no, you and he wasn't with his wife. Like, he was with his mistress. And we said, and of course we weren't going to show it if he didn't want us to. But he contacted us 40 times. Like he was... if you're listening, you know who you are. But he was terrified that we were going to reveal it all. So we saved a lot of marriages.
And finally, what's the one thing about Trigger Happy TV that fans always get wrong?
That I said, I'm on the phone. I never said that. I've never shouted, I'm on the phone in my life. It's really funny. I get every single day, people go, hello, to me. And 25 years later, I still don't really have an answer. I go, hello. But the other thing I get shouted at is, I'm on the phone. And I've never shouted that. Like, that's literally not my catchphrase. I never said that. It's not a big deal, but it's just weird.
Dom, it's been brilliant speaking to you. Thank you
very much.
Thank you for coming on. And
where should commissioners who want to commission a travel show off me contact me?
Well,
that's a good question.
Yeah, well, exactly. Why don't they contact me and I'll put them on to you? How about that?
Come on, guys, please.
So finally, how do you get tickets then, Dom?
It's very easy. So there are 4 big shows we're doing, one in London, Birmingham, Manchester and Glasgow. They're all in October and they're going to be amazing. So if you want tickets, probably the easiest thing at the moment is go to my website, www.domjoly1l.tv, or just look up Cuff and Taylor or Live Nation or whatever. But they're going to be brilliant.
All right,
as I told you, I've really planned it.
I can't wait. Dom, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks very much.
Well, that's about it for this week's show. TellyCast was produced by Spirit Studios and recorded in London. We'll be back again with another show next week. Until then, stay safe.